It was just another work day. I was working on my usual very important things when unexpectedly I heard a knock on the door. It was a local gentleman named Alvin, and he told me that he has an Audi he's looking to get rid of. A friend of his is actually a viewer of this channel, and he recommended him to offer the car to me. Alvin had run into some issues which led to him taking apart the engine, but before he was able to finish the project, he decided to move out of state, and the Audi wasn't destined to join him. A local junkyard offered him about $500, so he said if I'm willing to give him $600, the car is mine.
And you guys know me, I can't pass up on a good deal on an Audi, so I agreed.
The story was that the A6 overheated very rapidly, which led to the head gasket getting blown. Alvin removed the head but never got around to putting it all back together. Which means that I now have two choices: put this engine back together with a new gasket and hope nothing else is damaged, or buy a parts car that can donate a good engine.
It's finally time to get into this project, so let's see if our parts car starts. Yeah, I mean, it's making all the right noises. Fuel pump primed, things are beeping. We have no coolant, but we should be good on oil. Maybe I should check that first, because we definitely don't want to ruin our donor engine, right? Yeah, we're good. There's plenty of oil in there. All right, let's go. Oh no. What is that? Oh, okay, we're good. Never mind, we're good. That is our fan. Very loud. And probably pulleys too. So we're gonna try and move this thing in really quickly before damaging anything too far. Right, so I definitely should have anticipated that. I knew in the back of my head that this was going to be the case at some point back when I had just gotten this car. I figured, I was telling myself, hey, like, don't forget, your entire front end is pushed into the engine, so all of the pulleys, the supercharger belt, the accessory belt, all those things are going to be rubbing on the front end, and I kind of forgot. No worries though, if anything did get damaged, we obviously have spares from our original's A6's engine. The engine itself, I think, sounded great. At first I thought it was some crazy internal damage, maybe from overheating because this thing had no coolant, and maybe the previous owners drove it for a long time after crashing, but no, the engine actually seems to work really well, and I don't think I saw any check engine lights. Plus the battery is still holding charge, which is excellent. So without further ado, I'm gonna start tearing this thing apart and removing our engine. We'll see how bad this is. I don't think I've ever pulled one of these 3.0 supercharged engines yet, so this will be a first one. The good news is that I don't really care about this car, so I can kind of break things in the process. I don't care if I remove the subframe and stuff like that. Unfortunately, she's gonna go to the junkyard after this.
Reason being is that after this car had hit a deer, the owner filed an insurance claim, and the insurance estimated the repairs to be more than the car's worth, which led to them issuing a junk title, meaning that this car will never be registerable in the States or legal to use on public roads. Also, make sure to stick around to the end if you'd like to find out how much is spent on the parts car and all other expenses, as well as how much this car sold for after repairs.
Obviously we're going to pull the engine and we'll be able to address most of these gaskets that normally do not get addressed because of how hard it is to reach them when the engine is inside the car. And our noises were coming from right here where we have this fan control module just rubbing in our crank pulley. So some terrifying noises, hopefully no issues caused by that. This belt should probably be replaced.
So, like with most Audis, removing the engine usually means removing the front end. Theoretically, you can pull it down with the subframe, which I decided not to do because putting the subframe back on would have been unpleasant, and I still want the car rollable to get it out of the shop. With the front end off the car, all of our cooling is taken care of. Next, I'm going to tackle the electrical. The harness can be disconnected from every individual sensor switch and ignition coil, or it can be removed from the car side of things while maintaining everything on the engine. I chose to do the latter because this is significantly less connectors and much easier to figure out when putting things back on. So right behind the firewall in these plastic waterproof boxes, we disconnect everything from the engine computer and the entire nervous system of the car.
Yep, that's our ECU, all right. Geez, there's so many connectors for this ECU or this engine in general. Oh, what's that? That's some sort of a capacitor? That's kind of cool. And another connector down there. Finally, okay. Make sure we don't lose this relay or forget to reinstall it, because that's something I'll easily do. And that should be it. Hopefully. There's probably a ground somewhere still, but boom. Okay, finally. Okay. All right. Let's see what kind of shape our air filter is going to be in. In general, I'm pretty happy about this parts car. It just seems to be really well taken care of. And unfortunately, you don't see that every day. Yeah, look at that. Even the air filter is pretty new. This headlight is getting in our way a little bit. I don't think there's any point in trying to be nice to it. Now the fuel delivery we can disconnect right over here. That's pretty easy. Might get squirted with gasoline right now, but that's okay. It wouldn't be the first time. I should probably mark these because I might not remember which one went where, so I'll put it right on this. And an L for left on this. There we go. There we go, finally. All right, so fuel is disconnected, wiring is disconnected. I think basically all we have left is all the stuff at the bottom of the car. All right, it's looking pretty promising. I think we have a decent amount of space over the subframe to wiggle this engine out of here. First things first. We have these exhaust clamps, which are very rusty. Oh yeah. That's the stuff. Next, let's remove this bracket. Okay. It is going to be much easier to get our axles out if we can undo this pinch bolt, which is unlikely, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, it's this side is spinning, this side is not. That means that the bolt is about to snap. Lastly, we are going to remove the bolts that hold the axle to the transmission. Now the axle should be able to pop off the flange. There we go. Honestly, there might be enough room to not even have to take off the tie rod, but we already have that done. So let's see if we can fish this guy out. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I think I could have done this without touching the tie rod, but it definitely didn't hurt anything. Okay, at this point, we have the axles out, we have the exhaust out, the fueling is disconnected, the cooling is disconnected, the wiring is also disconnected, so I think all we have is just the structural things that actually bolt the engine to the car, to the frame. So that means the engine bracket, you know, the engine mounts, subframe, stuff like that. So we'll start dropping the subframe, unbolting the mounts, and hook up the engine hoist. Oh, I also have the drive shaft. Let's get that real quick.
Because this A6 has Quattro, aka all-wheel drive, besides the axles going to the front wheels, there's also one really large axle that goes to the rear differential and delivers power to the rear wheels. So we have to unhook that from the transmission. I had a bit of a delay
because one of the Allen bolts for the drive shaft actually ended up getting stripped on the inside of the, Allen fitting. But luckily, with a little bit of welding and some luck, this thing had loosened up. And there you go. After a couple of hammer hits, our drive shaft is free.
which means that we can start unbolting the engine from the car now that it has the engine hoist holding it up. The back of the transmission is not going to be supported by anything, and we don't want that falling down, so I'm using a floor jack to add a little bit of support.
At this point, in theory, we don't have a single bolt or nut holding the engine to the car, and all we have to do is lift it up enough that the engine mount studs come out of the engine bracket, which is right around here, and start going backwards.
I struggled, and quite a bit. As always with projects like this, when doing them for the first time, you miss some things.
I did realize that I have forgotten to unhook our shift linkage, the thing that goes from the gear selector inside the car to the gear selector on the transmission. And now the engine seems to be a lot more free. I think that was the main thing that was holding us back. All right, I think the jack is about to start hitting the subframe, so we need to come up with a different way to mount up and hold up our transmission. So I think I'm just gonna hook into this little ring here and use a ratchet strap to hold the back end to the engine hoist. Let's go. Yes. All right, well, that's a success. Now we just got to do this once again with the other car and then, you know, put this guy in there. I cannot wait.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost.
So the previous owner had removed the head and with the engine in the car, which is pretty impressive. Not a lot of people do that. But looks like it is pretty doable over here. With how long this engine sat without a head on it, and with how unsure we are about the fact that it would be fine with a new head gasket, I would just rather not risk it and not spend all this time putting this engine together and then, you know, find out that it has a bad block, which is why we decided to buy our parts car. Now, one of the sad things is that the parts car is in way better shape than this car is, at least just cleanliness and interior wise. Outside of it just sitting for a really long time, it's also got a lot of dirt and, you know, dog hair and stuff like that in here, which is fine. Like I understand just using a car and not worrying about that stuff too much. But it just gives us a lot of work to do when we go to sell it. So I kind of wish the roles were reversed and we were restoring that car, but that car has title issues and it is no longer to be registered. This, however, is a clean title, and this car has lower miles. I want to say maybe 120, 130,000, which is pretty manageable, especially after we give a refresh to the engine that was donated that's going to go into this. And by refresh, I just mean addressing all of the common issues on these engines and making it last a very, very long time after we put it into the car. Now in the parts car, I've already addressed our exhaust. I also removed our axles. So at this point, we just have all of our mounts, like the subframe and the engine mount and the transmission mount. And I also have the drive shaft disconnected already. One thing we are going to remember to do this time is disconnect our shift linkage before we lower the car. To do that, we're going to remove those two 10mm bolts, and then we simply pop off the ball joint linkage going onto the transmission. There we go. Obviously, all of our front end is already disconnected. I already got all the wiring, so I'm pretty sure all we have left is the engine brackets and the transmission mount.
Now outside of the preventative maintenance, we also need to replace a couple of broken parts. This coolant flange must have snapped from the impact, as well as the pulleys that got damaged from the front end being pushed in.
While we have this engine out of the car, I think it will make perfect sense to address some of the common issues on these 3.0 supercharged engines. Because generally they are considered pretty good engines. I definitely genuinely believe that. But there's a few things that are kind of hard to work on that are in the back of the engine that commonly go bad. Now the first thing is pretty doable with the engine still in the car, but having it out just makes it so much easier. And that will be the oil filter housing gasket. We have 3 bolts holding down this plastic housing, one of which is not actually a bolt, but more of like a weird looking nut. That's a triple square. Also have a little bit of wiring here and there that we should probably get out of the way. And there is a 10mm bolt back here that's also for the filter housing. And that should be the last of it. Oh, there's quite a bit of oil in there. Should have seen that coming. Come on, yes. There we are. So it's this gasket over here that will frequently cause oil leakage from the back of the engine, which would just cover your entire bell housing here and almost make it look like you have a rear main leak. Or it's frequently confused by the leak out of the timing covers here, which ours are actually seeping quite a bit, at least on this passenger side. So that'll be also addressed. And there's another little part hiding under here that we're going to be changing. I have never done that on one of these before. Kind of looking forward to it. And that should extend the reliability of this engine significantly. As some of you already know, I'm talking about the timing tensioners. There's plenty of Audi models that are known for not having greatest timing chains or timing chain tensioners. In particular, this engine doesn't really suffer from that a lot. This is known to be a pretty solid engine. However, once it gets to, you know, upper 180,000 miles plus, you know, things are starting to get worn. To avoid that and to make this engine last as long as possible, we're going to change the tensioners and hope that that will make this thing last for many years. Boom. Okay. There we go. Come on. Yes. So these timing covers are very frequently, well, they're always just placed on some RTV, and the RTV with age starts breaking down and leaking oil. And that's exactly what we have going on here. Here we have our timing tensioner, the upper timing tensioner. There are some tensioners lower down, but they're not known for going bad nearly as much as these are.
Now at this point, I decided to try and do this the lazy way, which was definitely a mistake. For whatever reason, I thought I'd be able to replace the tensioners without letting the chain or crankshaft move. So while being extra careful, I made a bunch of marks and put in new tensioners. I'm not gonna show this part because this was the wrong way of doing things and I'm going to pay for that later. Until then, I sealed the timing covers and placed them back on, and in general just got this engine ready to be put back in.
Perfect. The engine is now in place. Now we attach everything to it. Lastly, we got this heat shield that protects our axle boot from the heat coming from our exhaust. So definitely don't want to leave this off. Alrighty guys, it has been a pretty long day, but we are finally seeing some big progress. All I have left is our front end, which means that we're really close. All we have left is to put this guy on here, connect all of the hoses, and then we'll be ready for a first start. Ideally, I would have started this up and ran it even before putting this on, just to make sure we don't have any issues. But the transmission cooler is built into the radiator, meaning that if I were to start the car without this installed and connected, a bunch of transmission fluid would just get sprayed all over the place, and we don't really want that. So I'm gonna throw this on, connect the hoses, and then we're gonna finally start. Hopefully, we better start. You got this. All right, friends, without further ado, I think this is all we need to start it. I just have to give it some fluids and let her crank. So let's see, I think we should still have oil. Yep, we do. Then I will add some power steering fluid, because otherwise the power steering pump is going to be running dry, which we don't want. All right, a lot of this is going to get sucked in once the engine is running. Let's do coolant next. Now, the previous owner, when he ran into the head gasket issue on this car, on the previous engine, he ran a bottle of head gasket repair stuff through the cooling system, hoping that that was going to fix his issue. Two bad things about that. First, it didn't fix the head gasket issue. Second, the fact that now we have a lot of that residue throughout the cooling system, which we want to get rid of. So for now, I'm going to simply fill this in with distilled water, and that's going to hopefully flush it out a little bit, clean things up, and get rid of anything we don't want. And once that's drained, we'll be able to fill it in with proper coolant. Now, these goofy looking things here are going to be shutting off fuel to our high pressure fuel pump. So this hose brings fuel from the gas tank and the fuel pump over there into the high pressure fuel pump over here. I'm doing that to let the engine crank over a decent amount of times for it to build up some oil pressure, because we have brand new timing tensioners and those run on oil pressure, and with them being brand new, that means they don't have any oil in them, and to get the oil in there, we need to let the engine spin without starting. So we're going to do exactly that. We're going to shut off fuel to the engine and let the starter spin it over up until I'm happy enough with the amount of time it's done that, and then we'll be able to reintroduce fuel and let this thing actually start and run. Naturally, the battery in this thing is dead, so we're going to be using our GOOLOO A7 to start it up. Now, this thing isn't only a jump starter, it's also an air compressor, which makes it a very, very useful tool to keep around the shop or just in your trunk. And I say your trunk because I'm giving one away. Every single person that's going to leave a comment down below enters for a chance to win the GOOLOO A7. Because GOOLOO were kind enough to send me two. One for you and one for me. In one of my previous videos, I showed you how this thing inflated like 5 tires and then jump started my Hyundai Tucson with a blown engine like 7 times. Easy. Let's go again. Let's go again. Again. So these things are really powerful and they're just fantastic to have. So far, GOOLOO has been providing the best jump starters to the shop, so I figured I would share my joys with you. All right, we have battery power. Let's crank her over. Whoa, that wasn't supposed to start so fast. How did it start? We're not supposed to have any fuel in there. I don't know how it had fuel. Maybe there was some residual fuel left in the fuel lines. That would make sense. But I guess at this point, it already started, so we might as well just go for it. Okay, there's definitely some noises that I'm not loving. Things started great and then took a turn for the worse. So I'm kind of scared that because we had no oil pressure in those timing tensioners, they allowed the chain to skip. Or maybe it just ran out of the fuel pressure that was in the lines and now it just needs to circulate and bring more fuel into the motor. But I don't know, I kind of don't love what I'm hearing right now. I'm also hearing dripping. Oh, come on. Something's definitely leaking. All right, looks like some sort of a hose connector over here. Did I miss a hose? Why is coolant coming out of this? So I just removed this from the parts that were from this car originally, and this is where we're having coolant come from. This is just a cap that is supposed to be blocking off coolant. Maybe ours got cracked in the accident. Luckily we have this guy, so we can replace it. Okay, so I just hooked it up to a second battery. That way we don't have to rely on the jump starter, and we're gonna read our codes. And what we really do not want to see is timing correlation faults, because that'll mean our camshaft and crankshaft are not lined up, are not synced, and the chain skipped teeth. That would be like worst case scenario. I'm really hoping that's not what we're dealing with here. I'm nervous. Okay, we have 10 engine faults. Let's see what they are. Cylinder misfire, intake manifold, flap, camshaft adjustment. Transmission control unit locked. Okay, so it's possible that I made a bit of a mistake by not reusing our old transmission, because something I didn't think about is the fact that the transmission control module is built into the transmission itself. So now the engine control unit isn't recognizing the transmission control unit and is throwing faults because of that, because they're from different cars. And those can be linked to specific VIN numbers, and now they're not happy about meeting each other. Anyway, that's currently not the biggest problem. I want to know what's going on with our engine, so I'm going to try and crank it again. Hopefully it'll throw some new faults. Hopefully it'll just fix itself and run perfectly, but so because we most likely have a timing issue, I ended up borrowing a timing tool set for this engine from my friend Dean. Thank you, Dean. That's something I should have done before I even started touching the timing tensioners, but I thought I could make it work, and obviously I was wrong. You might notice that I already have the coils and spark plugs out of our cylinder 3, because that's how you measure top dead center. Top dead center of this engine matches with the top dead center of cylinder number 3. So we're gonna spin this over up until this extension here reaches its top, showing us that the piston in that cylinder is at the very top of its normal travel. And that seems to be, yep, this is it. Okay. So what I have to do now is remove our valve covers and take a look at our camshafts. Because the timing tool set comes with these cam bridges that can only go on if the engine is at top dead center. So if we are unable to install these tools, that will let us know for sure that I f***ed up. There we go. Okay. We are free. Yeah, the valve cover gasket is definitely nice and new. This thing is still soft, still super rubbery, which is exactly what we want to see. Okay, so it seems like I made some significant timing mistakes, to the point that the fact that the engine wasn't knocking when I started it makes no sense.
To those of you who aren't very familiar with engine timing, hopefully this will help. Most engines will have at least 2 rotating shafts. One crankshaft at the bottom over here, and at least one camshaft, usually more. In this case, on this picture there's 2, but our A6 has 4 of them. The crankshaft is connected to the pistons, and the camshafts are connected to the valves, both of which need to be in very specific parts of the engine at any given time to make it run properly, which is why they're connected via a belt or chain and are synced between each other. If the chain is stretched or loses tension, these shafts can go out of sync, aka be out of time. And that's a problem, because in interference engines that can mean that pistons will hit the valves, causing major internal damage to the engine.
I still don't know how it would have been at all possible for this to go this much out of time, except for the possibility that maybe our chain jumped over multiple teeth when it ended up starting, when I assumed that it would just crank with a starter with the fuel shut off. Because currently, with the engine at top dead center, like I mentioned, with the cylinder 3 being at the very top, technically, theoretically, These camshaft locking tools, they're supposed to be able to bolt into the camshafts. But when the engine is at top dead center, those bolt holes inside the camshafts are barely visible. So there's this one over here right on the side pointing that way. And then this guy is a little more visible right there, but still, both of those are supposed to be pointing up so that you can actually throw this guy on, make it sit nice and flush on top of the head, and then screw in. But obviously that is not going to be happening with how the camshafts are sitting right now. So yeah, I tried to take a shortcut. I am paying for it by having to remove our freshly sealed timing covers and having to redo the timing. But I still don't understand by what miracle and magic the engine didn't destroy itself in the amount of time that I've ran it. We should have been hearing knock, we should have been getting pistons flying everywhere and rods getting thrown through the block, and it didn't happen. And I already scoped all 6 cylinders and all pistons and valves look fine. Despite this being off by like 45 degrees, somehow it landed right in the perfect spot where the pistons and valves don't make contact. So I was getting confused yesterday because currently it doesn't seem like our top dead center is what we think it is. But basically the engine is supposed to be at top dead center when the cylinder 3 is at top dead center. At least that's what Google told me and what my friends thought.
But no matter what I do here, I won't be able to line up this exhaust camshaft into time because the cam lobes just aren't lining up with the pistons and would push down on the valves at the wrong time. Top dead center is basically an arbitrary point on the rotation of the crankshaft that the manufacturer chose as the reference point. Most frequently it is based on the number 1 cylinder being at its very top position. Usually there are marks made on the shafts that will show you where each shaft needs to be when you retime the engine when installing a new belt or chain.
Long story short, somehow I was misinformed. I think our top dead center is dependent on a different cylinder. There's some conflicting information that it's on cylinder 4, and most commonly it's on cylinder 1 for other cars. There's only one way to find out for sure, and that is using the crank lock pin. There is a little window over here, a little bolt hole with a plug on it that if you remove, you get access to a hole that goes inside the engine. And if you have the special crank locking pin, you screw it in and it enters the crankshaft because there is a hole made in the crankshaft specifically for this. And unless the engine is in top dead center, that tool would not go inside. Unfortunately, I don't think I have a crank locking pin for this engine, but hopefully we can just stick a scope in there, rotate the engine up until we see that hole, and look at what cylinder is at top dead center when this crank goes to top dead center. And that way we'll actually know for sure where the top dead center is. Usually this is very commonly available knowledge, but for whatever reason on these engines, it seems to be hard to figure out. Like I generally Googled multiple times, looked at forums, and I saw confirmation that it's cylinder 3, but currently, unless this car has some sort of a weird camshaft crankshaft situation, which it shouldn't, this just doesn't make sense. So it has to be that. This also means that our timing wasn't as far off as I thought it was, and now it's too late to find out how far off it actually had been before I removed the chain. Let's just spin the engine up until we see a hole in the crank. Oh yeah, that is it right here. Okay. See that guy? Right in there we have a nice little hole made for our specialty tool. I do have one for a different Audi engine, actually a Volkswagen engine. It's possible that it'll work, but honestly I don't really need to. I can tell that this is right here, and looking at our cylinder number 4, oh yeah, that is definitely top dead center. So somehow, some way, I had some wrong information where the top dead center is on this engine, and that caused a lot of issues.
So now that we finally have all of the right information and tools, I can actually properly time this engine and put it back together.
Okay, all of this should be buttoned up now. We are moving on to our cross pipe in the front. As you can see, I currently have the front core support pretty far pushed out from where it's supposed to sit, and I'm just utilizing really long bolts that bolt it to the frame rails. This way we get a lot more playroom without having to disconnect any of the hoses, because I would really like to avoid having to drain power steering fluid again, disconnecting transmission lines, and so forth. This way we have plenty of room in the front end, and while it's not going to be as easy as with the front end completely off, we should still be perfectly able to remove that cross pipe. All 4 bolts removed, so it's a matter of popping it off of this O-ring and removing these 4 hoses. The crossover pipe is now free, however, there's just so many things in front of it that I can't really come up with a good way to pull it out of here. It's possible we're gonna have to remove some stuff, at the very least these 2 front hoses. Alright, that's significantly more space. I think the supercharger pulley and the water pump pulley are not giving us enough clearance for this thing to slide out. So at least one of those has to be removed. These 2 guys just kind of squeeze it in there and don't let me pull it out. And 3. There we go. All right, are you gonna come out now? Yes, okay. That's all that we needed. All right, so let's see if we can figure out where this thing was leaking from. We got a nice little crack right over here. You guys see that? Right there. So, yeah, okay. We're ready to go. All right, everything is assembled. Obviously the front end isn't bolted up, but everything should be connected. I'm currently pressure testing our cooling system just to make sure we don't have any more coolant leaks, but shouldn't be the case. Looks like it's holding pressure pretty well. So we're ready for the first start. So let's just do it. Something I did fail to do last time was prime our power steering pump. And to do that, you simply need to rotate the wheel without the engine running. So we're gonna do that. This ensures that there's oil in the power steering pump and allows it to, you know, not run dry. Otherwise, that just leads to some noises. All right, jump starter is connected. It's time. That is much, much better. So much better. Purrs like a kitten. Okay. Now, these are the engine noises we want to hear. Outside of the fan noise, this thing sounds beautiful. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the engine is super quiet. We got 0 timing chain rattle. Everything was fantastic on first start. Well, I guess in this case, it's not really first start anymore, but you know what I mean. I think I'm just gonna let her run up to temperature. That way we can do a decent coolant flush before putting the front end back on. It'll be much easier with the front end being pushed away a little bit. But outside of that, I am very, very happy. This took maybe 2 extra days, but as long as it worked out in the end, right? I did just realize while our fan's going off, I forgot to connect our coolant temperature sensor that goes into the crossover pipe. So currently trying to put that on there now. There we go. Might have to restart it for that to take effect. There we go. All right, now it's saying coolant temperature. It knows that it's not overheating, and the fans turn off. Whew. Well, this is exciting news. This project took me about a week, a little longer than I would have hoped. But between removing the engine from the parts car, that took a day. Removing the engine out of this, that took a day. Doing the timing on the engine out, that took half a day. Sealing it back up, another half a day. And then redoing the timing, another day. So basically, yeah, quite a long project, but it was successful. I'll take it. Now we're gonna put some miles on this car, wrap up the front end, clean it up, and eventually sell it. Let's see how well she handles some revs. Perfect. If you remember, we do still need to address our safe mode on the transmission because that is currently not coded to the ECU. I do have some people I know who might be able to do the coding for that, so we're gonna give that a shot. Maybe I'll even try it myself first and see if I can recode the VIN on the TCU. Worth a try.
So I had put together the front end and got the car to a drivable state. However, as it turns out, the safe mode on the transmission computer completely locks it out. So when I went to drive it out of the shop, here's what happened.
Amazing. Wow. That's perfect. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't think we have any gears. The ECU just prevents the transmission from shifting into anything but park. So as you can see, the ignition turns on, our gear lever moves, and it moves the little thing on the transmission itself too, the little lever there, but the computer, the TCU, just completely ignores us. It is refusing to go into neutral or park or drive or reverse or anything except for park. So now we're just completely locked out in park and the car is completely immobile. So that is highly inconvenient, but luckily I do have a friend with some connections to people who can probably code this out. So eventually he's going to be here and hopefully this will be resolved. Okay. It should be good now. I mean, we're showing the gear down here on the cluster, and despite a couple of faults in the dash, nothing to be too worried about. She should be drivable. Look at that, first few feet. Glorious. A lot of brake rotor rust noise, but outside of that, beautiful. She's doing good. Okay. Honestly, suspension-wise, pretty smooth. Nice ride. Steering wheel is straight. No pulling left or right. I'm pretty happy with how this is driving so far. These buttons work terribly. They're, first of all, really worn out. Secondly, just probably have a bunch of crud inside of the circuit board over here. And what's most annoying is that this roller seems to be really not operating properly. So I continue spinning in one direction and instead it just hops back and forth. The same two options instead of scrolling down. So I think we're gonna just rip out this entire center console setup and replace it from the parts car. But at this point, outside of some cosmetic little issues and, you know, cleaning, she's back, baby. She is back. Only took me like 5 months to get to it, but oh well.
And soon enough, the car was ready for sale. It actually did turn out quite well. Considering the before and after, I think we did an excellent job. Regardless of how clean this thing is, we can only charge so much, and based on my local market, they are worth about $6,000. So I listed for $5,900, and in less than a day it was sold, which wasn't really something I expected. There was a minor hiccup after sale because I think the timing covers were still leaking oil. It's so much harder to install them with the engine in the car that it's very possible that the RTV didn't seat properly. So the buyer reached out to me pointing out the oil leak, and we agreed on a partial refund of $700 for them to take care of that for themselves. So with that subtracted, I had spent a total of $1,800 to fix the car, including the parts car's cost. However, a good thing about having a parts car is that I can also sell parts off of that, as well as turn in the rest of the car to the junkyard. So I got around $900 back for that, and altogether in the end we're looking at $4,300 in profit. Clearly this was one of the more involved projects and required a lot of work, but I still would consider this a very successful flip. Plus, it always brings me joy when I manage to save a pretty nice Audi from a junkyard. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.